Now, AI, artificial intelligence, there's nothing intelligent about AI. It's not thinking, it's just regurgitating what it's been told.
Okay, Kimberly, thank you so much for being on the Launching Better Parents podcast. Super excited to have you on. I wanted to talk to you about, you are a college professor, an adjunct professor at the Shasta Community College, and I don't know, an award-winning author. There's like so many things to say about you. You're a writing coach. I mean, you do so many things. So, of course, we want to really delve into writing and how it's going to help, our youth, and some tips and tricks that you can offer to them. And just, I want to learn a little bit more about you. So, can you give us a little synopsis of like how you got into writing?
Oh, sure, absolutely. First of all, it's great to be here with you, Ashley, always, and talking about the things I'm passionate about, which is writing and literature and the arts, but also children. Being a mother, I have two teenagers, and I am a passionate mother and hoping to do well by my children and all children.
Yes.
So I got into writing. It was after I really sought a career in music. So music was my first love. I wasn't talented enough. And when I was in Belmont University in the South, I started really reading. It's the first time, even of course I read in high school, but I didn't really read until college, and to really immerse myself in story and how story can transform a person. It did transform me. It made me feel large. It made me feel connected. It made me feel understood. And I just desired to be a part of that world, to be a part of the writers that came before me, the contemporary writers. Ever since. So ever since my early 20s, I have been writing, studying writing, teaching writing.
Wow. So you started at Belmont as a music major, and then you switched over to writing. And do you feel like that really, like the music helped translate into writing, or like do the arts kind of work together like that?
Yeah. So I do, and that we could talk about that as well. So for me, I first stepped into writing as an artist. And you could step into writing from a business standpoint, from a journalist standpoint. But for me, I stepped into writing as an artist, meaning how I look at the world, how I move through the world is through an artist's soul, through an artist's heart. And so absolutely, I think music on some level, it transcends language because it doesn't need a language. But for me, just even my personality, I tend to love to spend time alone in my own head and heart and creating stories. That just, like I said, it made me who I am today, starting to really read. Yeah.
So no, I know that you are a writing coach and you have a business called The Right Life. And so how do you use that? How do you teach people, like, as far as coaching and talking about the right life? Because I know it's kind of all mixed in there, your approach, and also the way that you approach your own writing is how you also teach others. So
Right.
what are some ways that you've learned throughout the...
Well, for me, it became clear to me that I was not going to separate my living from my writing. And, I think it was Oprah who said, find what you love and it won't feel like work. And that's what it is for me. It's not work. I mean, it is work, but sometimes it's very challenging. But so The Right Life does talk about how you move through this world as a writer. And there's also, for my coaching and that, I've really had to look at it as it's part of me. It is, but as a coach, I try to leave my own writing just gives me the validation. It gives me the skills to teach. So
Right.
my articles on medium.com are 85% teaching about writing. And so I am developing courses, online courses, and communities to teach writing. And of course, I also, teach writing in the classroom. But for me, it's not separated, but I do put on different hats, if you will, when I'm working on my novel versus when I'm working on The Right Life, which is Kimberly as the writer, helping other people achieve their dreams to write the books that they have in their hearts.
Yeah. And so one of the other things that I know you're into is that, like, how does, if there's someone out there who maybe has a child who wants to publish a book, or maybe they themselves want to write a book and publish it. I know that you have a publishing company as well. So how does the publishing industry work, especially with like the introduction of AI and all of these new writing tools that can help people write? And we're going to delve into this a little later, but also like helping students write and kind of keeping that authenticity in your writing, even with the help of AI and with the new things, the new developments in the publishing industry. What are some of
Yeah.
the tips you have about how that
So I'm
works?
going to break that because you had a lot there. So,
I know.
uh,
We can
so
talk about the kids a
maybe
little
I'll
later.
backpedal. So first I'll talk about a little bit about AI and authenticity. Uh, Authenticity is probably one of my core values. So anyone who knows me knows that I strive to be authentic. And even when I'm not authentic with myself, I spend hours, wondering why, what happened, who was I trying to please. And
Right.
and if
Yeah.
you read my fiction or even my memoir sort of stories, they're completely raw and authentic. Um, so for me, again, I come to this as a creator, as an as an artist. So that's very, very important. Now, AI, artificial intelligence, there's nothing intelligent about AI. It's not thinking. It's just regurgitating what it's been told. So, and we could get really philosophical and say that we all are just regurgitating what we've been exposed to, like AI.
Mhm.
But I tend to think that humans were a little more special than that, that we are able to think things through on a deeper level. And always am I promoting that with my students and my children. And so I see, and there's tons of talk about it, in even in the educational systems and in the medium platforms that I belong to. As far as do they accept AI written articles? Do they not accept it? So it does. I see how it helps with organization, with maybe unraveling a thought. But as far as being authentic, it's not capable of that. And so
Right.
that's my feeling about that as far as right now. And going back to the publishing industry, there are so many different doors for publishing right in this time in history. The New York paradigm with the big publishing houses is often people's dream, but there's so many hybrid publishing houses, and then of course self-publishing that are opening up. And
Right.
so in some level, people used to think that self-publishing was selling yourself short, and it's not seen that way anymore. Um, and as long as any writer can start building an authentic following and readership, in some ways, it is could be the most profitable way of starting a career in writing. And just on a side note, this really hit me today. I was reading a little tidbit about Dolly Parton, and that she wrote Jolene and I Will Always Love You in the Same Night. And within months of those being produced, Elvis Presley said, I want to sing those songs. So Colonel Parker approached her and said, Elvis Presley would like to record your songs. And he said, there's one catch. When he records a song, he retains half of the song rights, as if he wrote half the song. And
Right.
Dolly Parton said, no, I'm not going to do that. I wrote these songs. They're my songs. And she spent the whole night crying about it, her decision, because it could have been, of course, Elvis Presley. But the idea is for her, it was her work. She wasn't going to sell it to even to one of the most famous people in history.
Yeah.
So there are
And
those ideas that maintaining rights is important to a lot of artists and writers.
it's, I mean, intellectual property is huge, especially with the internet and all of the things that, you know, people can swipe and take. And that is something that I think, you know, I try to tell my kids and anyone that I come in contact with, really, that creating now is like the best thing you can do, but it is tough to let those creations out because you don't want them to be stolen. And there's not really a ton of protection,
No.
you know, unless really, I mean, maybe you would know, like, I mean, what kind of protections are out there for any sort of writing online?
I don't think they're, especially with AI. I mean, there's a lot. That's why it is, hitting the court system right now. There's not a lot of protection, especially once you think of some of the countries outside of the United States or the UK or something. So I have personally never wrapped myself into those concerns so much. And I think and it's going to get into what I think we really want to talk about, is because personal narratives can't be stolen. You can't steal my stories, my stories.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what I think when you know, when we talk about like creating and we talk about authenticity and we talk about intellectual property, you know, with AI, it is going to be more important to add in those personal aspects of all of your writings, anything that you do. Now, since you started talking about
Mm-hmm.
stories, I love that you brought that up. Um, how would you, you know, one of the things that I have a 16-year-old and you have a 16-year-old too, and you know, some of them are trying to go off to college, and this is going to be the year when they start to write all of those essays and things like that. And talking about putting personality into these things, what would you recommend as far as how people should direct their children when they're writing these essays for college and getting ready for you know, the college world, which is obviously always changing?
Right. I think it is taking note of their personal stories and I think that because of the world we live in, where everything's so grand, everything, is so polished and, filtered and edited. And, in many ways, we live in a pretty false world. So teenagers somewhat think, oh, that's not important. Oh, I did that. And you might bring up, well, what about the time you helped an elderly person walk across the street? And they'd be like, oh, that's not important. And I think, or how about the time you, were teaching your little sister to ride a bike and you learned how to step out of yourself? And they might say, well, that's nothing. That's no big deal. But it's those little things that really do add up to who we are and express the human condition and the human. And I think as we said, as we move into more of a AI world, I think what all of us are going to be hungry for is connection, true connection. And you don't necessarily meet that true connection by just showing your trips to Italy or winning the regional soccer championship. I mean, those are awesome things, but it's not necessarily what shows us your vulnerability, your strengths, who you are as a person.
Exactly. Yeah. And I think, you know, one of the one of the prompts I think that come up are like, how do you plan to impact the world? And there is no other answer than what you personally want to do, to really help improve the world and make it a better place. That forces you to be authentic. But I love what you're saying about going to some of the smaller things, like maybe, setting a goal for yourself and then how hard it was to accomplish that, or whatever, and how it always can translate into something larger. But yeah, I love
Yeah,
that.
exactly.
Mhm.
So I would just, as a parent, I would encourage, and it's hard. Like I said, I have teenagers, so I know you say one thing and they say, no, 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 no. And you let that
Yeah.
ride, you let that wave ride out. But they're still thinking about it. And you
Yeah.
can come back to it again and say, okay, well, what's your thoughts? And I would hope that it could also be a bonding time for a parent or a caregiver and hers or his child, and to just almost like looking through that photo album of your special gifts. And again, I
Mhm.
think it's in the world, as on some level, as our world becomes smaller, because of our connections to everything. I really think that we I think that some of those true human connections are what are going to feed us and touch us, and I mean, I'll just say I've been working on my memoir for many years now, and I sent it to an editor, and her comments was, and this was back when in my Nashville days, so I had met some um, famous people, and she says, Vita,
Yeah.
Kimberly, the the people that really interest me are like your mother. I want to know more about your mother, and
Oh,
um, and I thought, oh yeah, that's it. That's what we want to know. Yeah,
yeah.
yeah,
Yeah. You want to go deeper with people
yeah,
and see.
yeah.
Well, on another note, so okay, you've had a writing career. You've sent out this memoir that you were just talking about, and also, you've published your first book, and I know that did pretty well. I read the book, so we'll have that link down below so you guys can get that too. So what is it like to have a writing career? Like, I mean, if you were going to tell someone or give someone advice about starting a writing career, what would you say?
So I would say it's a hard one because, like I said, it's not like being a nurse or a lawyer or a
Right.
teacher, even though I do teach some. Um, it's not like you've jumped through these hoops and then you become something. You pass your realtor's test and then you are. And it really has to stem from a self knowing that this is the life you want to lead, and to realize, I mean, to own that. And that did take me a lot of time. And I would question it because it's, it's, it's not an easy road. I can, as far as building a career in writing, but it certainly can be done. And I would just say, own it, and do what you need to do. I mean, spend those hours writing, reading, and studying the craft. And when you walk into a room, own that you're a writer, and get your stuff out there. It's really, really scary, and but you need to be read, and you need that feedback. So I would tell that person just to keep at it, and start slowly building that portfolio. And I mean, I think success does begot success, and yeah.
So I tell a lot of kids that I meet, like in internships, and I really anybody that I'm like, hey, get your work out there, get your work out there. However, you need to get it out. Like if it's a blog or it's on Medium or if it's a YouTube, whatever it is, get your work out there. And so, would you say that it would probably be a good route for parents to encourage their children to, if they are writers or they love music or there's some sort of artist, to just start putting that stuff out now, you know, like create,
Mhm.
and start just putting it out there.
Absolutely. I mean, if you talk about like recording, like a recording artist, you bet those, people who are recording or, they're dropping their songs or, but certainly, I mean, but there is, especially, I mean, with shorter pieces, you can get them out faster. But I mean, often with novels, and this is where the frustration happens. It can take a long time to finish a novel, and it can take a very long time, or it can take a short time, depending on really who you are. I mean, Stephen King writes novels very quickly. Tolkien, I think, spent 16 years writing, The Lord of the Rings. So that just all depends. But certainly, I would say, yeah, even, I mean, for young people, I would say, yeah, I would say write that novella, write that 100-page novel and get it out there. Yes, absolutely. There's so many ways to do it now.
Okay. Yeah, it's just very interesting because I don't know. I'm thinking about how kids go about doing all of these, TikToks and all of these different things. And I know there are a lot of kids out there who love being an artist, but when we grew up, it was more along the lines of get the finished product done and then put it out.
Mm-hmm.
And now it's almost like share the journey as you go. And we were talking about like intellectual property and talking about, you know, people swiping your stuff and all of that. So I'm just wondering, like, from that artist's perspective, is that scary to
Yeah.
do, or is it something,
Well, I think for a story, or even if you were writing a journalistic story that was pretty in depth, I wouldn't necessarily put like a chapter out there till you were finished.
okay,
But I'm
okay,
talking more about like if you write smaller things, and certainly about the journey. I would recommend that either like, I know the young people like TikTok, but there's a lot of people who like Instagram too, who are younger, and that warrants itself to be read. I think you could read a short paragraph on Instagram and just to start building that, 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 that,
that
yeah.
repertoire, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like your kind of like your resume,
Right. It's,
and
it is
it's
scary,
cool.
but, you're going to find your readers who resonate with you. Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. Oh my gosh. So can can a teenager establish a writing career, and what when you, just like you were saying, like, there's no credentialing to say yes, you're now a writer. So what would that even look like if someone wanted to establish a writing career, or you have a child who really is just an amazing writer? What do you do with that?
Yeah.
Like,
Again, there's, first I would, have to talk about like what kind of writing this person's doing. But, um, I mean, I heard it said, I mean, I don't know if this is probably is true, that most of like celebrity stuff will be written by AI, or, brief news will be written by AI. But anything that takes,
mm,
again, true thought and true research will still be written by, humans. And,
right, right.
and of course, story. So I would, I would, I would encourage them. I mean, there's lots of journals that they could start submitting to. I mean, there is different platforms to start getting their work out there. Um, and then as far as if they're writing something larger, just getting that done and getting it published and start selling that through social media, through word of mouth, through email lists, and
Yeah, so selling the final
right,
product.
exactly, yeah.
Yeah. No, you were talking about the journals. What are the journals that you're kind of referring to?
Well, there's still the traditional journals that we think of like academic journals. Like a lot of universities
Oh,
still have academic journals, like that they would publish maybe a memoir, fiction, or even nonfiction pieces in them. So
okay.
and especially if they're going, to a certain, I know, like I went to Humboldt and they had their academic journals, the Toyon. And so most, I don't know about most, but many universities have what we call journals that they could start writing to. And
Okay.
then all the online magazines and newspaper. And yeah, there's just for each, it would depend on what genre that student is or that young adult is leaning towards.
Okay. So with your first book, how long did it take you to write your first book? And like, give us a title,
Okay.
give us the whole
Yeah.
background, everything.
So my first book is called Out of the Shadows, and I started it when I was pregnant with my son, and I had already written another manuscript that never was published, but I was worried that once he came that I would lose all my inspiration and just keep writing. So I thought, well, I'll start it before he's writing, and I tend to be pretty disciplined, and that will just keep me. So I wrote that book. Required lots of research because it had to do with the Darfurian genocide, and then I did research on it. I likened it to what was going on in World War II and in and parts of Afghanistan. So I spent tons of hours researching it. And I did the one thing that people tell you not to do when you have infants is I didn't sleep when he slept. I wrote and researched while he slept. So I did go a little loony for a few years. But that book took me about six years to write, research, and edit.
Wow.
But I had two children. I had Elias, and then a couple years later, Annika was born.
Yeah. But that's a testament that it can get done. Mm-hmm. So at that time, how were you making time to write?
Like during his naps, or I would sometimes hire my mother to come for a couple hours to give me so I could have writing time.
Yeah.
I've just made it happen.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And how was the publishing process for you? Like, how did that come together? What did that look like for you?
So, I went ahead, and I don't, it was just a decision I made, and it was a decision again for me to be able to control what the book itself. I did send it out to 25 agents, which is in hindsight is really, really, really a low amount.
Yeah, that's not a lot.
No, it's not a lot. And at the time I figured it was not, the book itself was full of hope, but it was dealing with some dark issues. And I thought, well, it's not New York isn't interested in the genocide in Sudan. So I'll open my own publishing company. Therefore, I could put it into contests. I could, as an independent publisher, I could get it into Barnes and Nobles and Costco. And so after the book was published, I did put my writing, so to speak, on the back burner for at least a year and a half, and I became a marketer and a publisher.
Yep.
So that was a different
promoter. Yeah, you were wearing all the different hats.
And that is something else I would like to say, that in today's world, right or wrong, writers do have to wear lots of hats.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I think that goes for pretty much anyone who is sharing their craft, especially if you're sharing it online. I think it just is something that you have to do.
Yeah.
And I think kids are really well versed in doing that.
Yeah,
at this,
yeah.
They know how to use all of the technologies that are available, and if they want to get something out there, they know how to do that. So in that way, I feel like they are very well equipped to, if they want to write a book or they want to share a story or share their music, they're very well equipped to do that. Which is why I think it's so interesting to hear from someone you've gone through the traditional routes of, I wrote a book, I tried to get it published, and then you had to learn the marketing side and become that, in order to get your book out. But then it won awards and did really well. So
no, I am immensely proud of all that when I think of all I did for that. Yeah. And it's a great book. I
Yeah.
still hear people, I mean, I still get comments and once
Yeah.
in a while.
No, it's a fantastic
Yeah.
book. And it's very interesting. I think your research was very in depth for at least for the person who doesn't know much about
Yeah.
it. And I think it put a very important issue on the map, like for people to be aware that these things are happening. How did you decide that you wanted to talk about Darfur?
It wasn't, so it happened through watching that movie Hotel Rwanda, and when
Oh,
I
okay.
was pregnant. And you know, all of us have heard about the atrocities in World War II, and the question always, you're posed with, what would I have done? That's the question. I mean, at least everybody I've ever talked to, what would I have done if I saw this happening? And I went to, again, I went to Humboldt, which was a very activist school, and it was shocking to me that I did not know or do anything about the genocide in Rwanda. I was like, what? This, I was just like appalled that this happened. And again, at least I'm just talking about me. I just wasn't in the know. And
Yeah.
so I started researching, and then I started researching, and I was like, oh my gosh, that didn't just happen then, it's happening now. And I guess I'm a little naive. I'm always a little bit shocked that these kind of things happen. I'm just like, I would think that we've elevated as a human race. But so I was like, oh my gosh, I have to do something. I have to give voice at least to one person. Yeah. So that's how that came about.
Yeah, no, I love it. I love it. And you're currently working on a novel, and how's that going?
So,
and what is this novel or memoir? This is your
well,
memoir.
that's my memoir, but I'm finished with another. I'm like, other than what we call line editing, proofreading, it's all done with all the global edits, but it's called Self Portrait. That is finished. Like, it's been several years in the making as well. So that I'm trying to decide. I will probably do a hybrid. I won't totally self-publish it. It's a hybrid situation that they can help me at least get it to the major distribution centers. But it has to be happen at a time when I also can then dedicate myself to promoting it. But that book is it's about a woman who lives a provincial. Actually, it starts set in Reading, which I rarely do. So it is in Reading, and she has dreamed of being an artist, and so she's trying to learn to balance being a mother, a wife, and an artist, and it's not going so well. And and then where that journey takes her.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, I love that. And I mean, I bring that up because, I like for people to understand that writing and writing books and being an author and all of those things, like, it's an exercise in patience. I mean, the 7 years, the 6 years, all of the re-editing and things like that are very time intensive.
Yeah.
And I think that when we're talking to a younger generation, or we're talking to our children, just writing like a short essay seems like it takes forever for them, just for them to wrap their minds around it, and it should be done like that. And so I think it's nice to hear you kind of encourage just taking your time and hearing that, someone who is accomplished in doing the writing aspect of everything and getting published, um, the task of just finishing and sticking with it and not giving up on yourself is huge.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of kids need to know that. And we as parents need to be able to encourage that when we do have artists in our home.
Right.
Because,
Yeah. Yeah. It's just,
I'm not an artist at all. So this is very interesting to me.
So it's not to say that it can't be done. I mean, like I said, Faulkner wrote As I Lay Dying in 6 weeks, and it's a masterpiece, right? So it's not to say that amazing works can't be produced quicker. I really think it's one of those personal not decisions, but just personal journeys. And
Yeah.
some books, and so my memoir, that's probably been my longest work, because I work on it and then I stop. But I did just finish the whatever. When you talk about drafts, it's so hard, because fifth draft, I did finish a novella pretty quickly. It's a Christmas novella that I'm pretty
Oh,
much done with. So I did write that one, pretty quickly for me.
yeah. And where would you publish this now that you've written it?
The Christmas one,
Yes.
I'm still working on that as well. My that inspiration came because I mean, I don't know how, I love Christmas time, and it just seems like there's a shortage of great Christmas movies and Christmas books. I mean, there's some out there, and we could all name our favorites for sure. And I just thought, I'm going to write one. Toni Morrison says, "Write the book you want to read." So I was just like, I'm gonna write a Christmas book that you buy
I love it.
at Thanksgiving, and you're finished on Christmas Eve. And so it's, yeah.
That's very cool. I mean, it's just so interesting. Do you feel like it's difficult to explain to people, you know, what you do and like how, I mean, I think for any writer, just trying to find like writing jobs and trying to, because a writing job is very different than being a
Right.
writer, you know,
And then
right?
teaching writing. So that's the age old. So many artists teach, and I do, and I love to teach. So I'm not taking, but I have to be careful, because it's also very time consuming and energy.
Yeah.
So even with like my coaching clients, I usually only work with one manuscript at a time, just because of how much energy. I mean, I think about people's work when I'm at grocery shopping or before I fall asleep, so it's the amount of energy it takes. But yeah, and even some of the people closest to me probably don't know how much I work, or how I work, and I wake up before anybody else, and I work. And often, if my kids are busy in the evenings, I'm opening my computer again. So there's no way I could clock the hours, because it's just
Right.
happens.
It's
Yeah.
ongoing. Yeah. And I think part of what, honestly, I'll say for me, like just writing blog posts or writing anything, I think it's actually a little anxiety producing. I know that, like for kids, I think sometimes it can be anxiety producing as well. And especially, if you have a busy schedule in school and you're doing sports and you're doing other things, sitting down to write really does take um, it takes so much
Mm-hmm.
focus that, like things kind of need to be, at least for me, things need to be like the perfect, storm of like everything's quiet. I have my headphones, like I'm sitting in the right spot, like everything has to be just
Mm-hmm.
so. How would you recommend getting over those types of things for kids that maybe, or anybody really who wants to write, but maybe doesn't have like the perfect
Right.
circumstances? So you feel like maybe,
and
they
and
don't have the
and I
energy.
think it is an ongoing. So whether it is writing, or writing an essay, or doing an assignment in school, I mean, I often tell my daughter that she spends way more energy thinking about it than actually doing it. And but I'm not great at it. I'm good at it, but I'm not great at it. For some reason, sometimes when I sit down at my computer, you think of at least 15 things you need to check on your computer before. And I have to remind myself, Kimberly, get
Yep.
your most important work of the day done first. And
Mhm.
and I think it's like anything. It's like, and then when I open, so like recently I was finishing up my Christmas novella. I can fall when I just read the last line I wrote, and I can fall back into that space. So our brain is we can train our brain to do so many things, right? And just like we could train our muscles, and we train ourselves to drive down our street without even thinking about it. So you can train your brain to work that way too. Is to so when you start start to write, open that page, it's just repetition. It was, again, Faulkner, I believe, who said, I only write when I'm inspired, but I make myself be inspired every morning at 9 a.m. And
yeah, that's right. That is
so I think that there's just truth to that. I think, and
because it comes down to
yeah,
more than anything else, right? It's like
and it's the fear of perfection. And I think that's, like I said, when I was with my daughter, she falls into that. Oh, it has to be great. It has to be, I want to wow my teachers. I want to wow my readers. And if I allow myself to say, I can't wait to wow my readers, I don't get any work done. I have to just stay with the story.
Now, and I love that, stay with the story. What type of tools do you use when you are sitting down to write? Like, are there distraction-free tools that you have, or are there any specific like apps that you use when you're going to sit down to write like, do you use Google Docs or do you use some writing software?
I don't. And I know there's some great ones out there, and maybe it's just, I haven't taken the time to do that, but I do sometimes. I carry, old fashioned, they can't see this, notebooks around, but I also, I just open up a Word document, and to be honest, I rarely turn off my computer. I don't know if that's good for my computer or not, but that document is always right there. Whatever I'm working on is usually open and ready. So anytime I sit down to work with it, it's not like, oh, where did it go?
Yeah, no, that's really smart.
And so,
Even when you have multiple projects, this is what you do?
Yeah. So I have multiple tabs open at all times. Sometimes my computer is so warm I can't set it on my lap. It's like it's gonna burn me. It's overheating. So yeah.
Oh my gosh. Well, if you had any advice for young budding writers, what would you say? What would you tell them?
I think reading is your number one friend. I mean, just read and read and read in the genre that you want to write. If you want to be a journalist for, the New York Times, you should be reading, stuff that was written 50 years ago, stuff that was written now, some of the greatest journalists. If you want to write dystopian novels, you should be reading all of them and really get to know the genre. And so reading is always your best teacher. And then I think too, for me is, being present to life. I mean, because that's why you're writing, is to be able to document life. And so for me, yeah, just not getting too caught up in the page, but, go for a walk, when your friend calls and say, hey, do you want to say, yeah, you bet. I mean, even though I'm very disciplined, that's why for me, working first thing in the morning makes sense, because then the rest of the day can go more.
Get out of hand, like it's probably anyway.
Yes, yeah.
Yeah, I totally understand what you're saying there. Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, no, that's very interesting. Okay, well, I guess we can go into our speed round.
Okay.
Ready?
Yeah.
So now this is advice, but this is advice for parents of children that we're going to call artists, because I'm just going to encompass all different types of artists. What kind of advice would you give to parents of artists in today's world?
Oh, just support them, be there for them, listen to them, encourage them, because I'll tell you what, it's the artists that are going to be the leaders of our society. Because and not to say that other people won't, and I don't mean that like you have to be an artist or a musician or writer to be an artist, but people who can think outside the box, people who can communicate that in different ways, and to listen to people, truly listen to people. Those are the people that are going to be fascinating and make change in our world. So I just say support it, be there, listen, stop what you're doing and say, show me. That would be my advice to parents.
Yeah. I love it. And what's your current book that you're reading?
And I know I'm actually reading 3, which is not uncommon for me. because I keep them at different places. So I'm reading The Lessons in Chemistry. I'm reading The Seven Husbands of Evelyn Hugo, and I'm reading Capote's Breakfast at Tiffany's because I have never read it. So
Oh,
I better, yeah, it's amazing. Okay.
which one are you loving the most right
Well,
now?
the best is Capote's Breakfast at Tiffany's, but
Okay.
yeah.
Okay. And what is your favorite movie?
My favorite, if people ask me, it's the Dead Poets Society. I just, you know, first of all, you know, um, yeah, it just teaches people again to look at life through their own lenses and to really, you know, as he says, suck the marrow out of life and to live passionately and yeah, yes.
And then lastly, what is your favorite quote?
My favorite quote is by Maya Angelou, and it's you can't something to the effect you can't use up creativity. The more you use, the more you have. So it's not so
Ooh, I love
never be like, oh, I'm going to save that, or I'll write about that later. It's there. The more you write, the more you create anything, the more you have. It just becomes you just become a wealth of creativity. Yeah.
I love that. That's actually so encouraging
Yeah.
just for everyone. Anyone listening to this, that is really an encouraging quote. Um, Kimberly, thank you so much for coming on. And I would really love for people to be able to connect with you with your books and just learn a little bit more about who you are. Really an interesting woman all the way around. So I will have all of your information down below, but if you could just tell us where would be the best place to start to connect with you, where
Well, I
would
have
you
a
recommend?
website. It's Kimberly Carlson Isara. That's spelled AESARA.com. And then I'm on Instagram almost daily, Kimberly Isara as well. I have a Medium account that I publish several times a month, and that's Kimberly Carlson Isara. And so you can always message me. I love to hear from people and to ask anything. Ask me anything, any questions.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much again. I think you've given so much advice to our parents and any kids that might be listening, any youth that are writers and just writers in general. So thank you so much for sharing that with us
Yeah.
today.
Thank you, Ashley. Really glad to be here with Launchpad. Great.
Well, thank
Mm-hmm.
you. All right, let me stop our recording.